starting out a little bit late. But tonight we have two very important subjects that deal directly with Kashrut, how to maintain a kosher home, or if God forbid something did not go right, something became not kosher, how to make it kosher, including how to deal with a situation where one is invited to somebody else's home and he does not know whether that individual perhaps immersed new vessels in a mikveh or not, whether he could eat or not, or if one is in a hotel. The various issues that we are faced in life to deal with these two areas, the area of tevilat kelim and hagalat kelim, or the akshara. Tevilat kelim involves immersing newly purchased vessels, kelim, pots, pans, that were manufactured by Goy, by non-Jew. So if you go today to Kmart and you buy yourself a new pot that was manufactured by Goy, you have to assume, unless you know it's a Jew, in the United States it's a Goy. If it's in Israel, you can assume it's a Jew, unless you know it came from Gaza, right? So if it's a keli that was manufactured by Goy, owned by Goy, or owned by Goy in some way, for example, you bought it in his store, even though it may have been manufactured in Hong Kong by a Jew. But the fact that it was owned now by Goy, still, this keli requires tevilah. It requires immersion in a tevilah, and that has to be a kosher tevilah. It will be kosher for a woman who is in idah to immerse herself in, or it could be in a ma'ayan, it could be in the ocean. Anything that's kosher for a mikveh would also qualify for tevilat kelim. Today, in many big cities, there's a special mikveh just for tevilat kelim, just for that purpose. It's smaller, even though if you tried hard, you can jump in yourself, but it's not intended for that. It's intended only for kelim. So this only applies most of the time when you buy something new. Unless, of course, you were to buy something used from a goy, but most of us are not going to do that. So if you go out and buy something new, depending on what it's made from, as long as it was owned and manufactured by a goy, it may require tevilah in a mikveh. The reason for that, good question, what's the purpose? Why does the Torah tell us that we need tevilah? So the simple explanation is that it is removed from the reshut hatumah to the reshut hakdusha. Just like a convert, when he converts, one of the things he does is immerse himself in a mikveh to remove himself from that reshut, from the tum'ah, from the impure side, and he's coming over to the reshut hakdusha. He also requires circumcision and kabbalat ha-mitzvot. A convert requires three things: acceptance upon himself, committing himself to Torah mitzvot, which is actually one of the most important things. If without that he's not a convert, in the circumcision and the mikveh. So in a tevilah of kelim, very similarly, we need to immerse it in a mikveh of mayim, which has 40 seah or 200 gallons approximately of rainwater, which will remove it from the reshut hatumah to the reshut hakdusha. And it's something spiritual. Of course, you don't observe any change in it, but that's an important change that occurs in a human being as well as in a keli. Now, the reason why the Torah is requiring this of a keli, it's not just any keli, not any vessel. It's a vessel that is used directly with the preparation of food. So what we infer from this is that obviously the Torah attributes great importance, hashivut rabbah, to anything that we put into our mouth. Not only does the food have to be kosher, now apparently we learn that the kelim need to be immersed in the mikveh, so they in a sense also become kasher. Not that they're tarif, it's not an end of the world, but it's important. Otherwise the Torah would not have mentioned it. So there is some importance attributed by the Torah to immersing a newly purchased keli that used to belong to Goy, manufactured by Goy, in a mikveh, to remove it from the tumah to the kedusha. Okay, so that's what this whole list is all about. So we need to discuss just briefly what the conditions are, what type of kelim need to be immersed, and so forth. So let's begin with the materials. The Torah mentions metal, and when we say metal, we mean gold, silver, copper, tin, and lead. Iron is metal, is steel, is a form of steel, obviously, yeah. But as we will soon see, there's questions about other materials that are not mentioned in the Torah. What about aluminum? What does that come under? What category does that come under? The rabbis include in this category glass, even though glass is not a form of metal. Nevertheless, because glass can be broken up and recreated, just like metal can be melted and reformed, so they said glass requires tevilah in the mikveh as well. No, we'll talk about that. That's a different idea of whether it's porous or not. When we talk about hagalat kelim, how to make it kosher, we'll talk about porous, non-porous. But for the immersion purposes, if you buy anything that's made of glass, even if it's Duralex, Pyrex, and all those forms of glass, it requires tevilah with a beracha. If it's one keli, it's al tevilat keli. If it's many kelim, al tevilat kelim, and so forth. How about et even mecheres? What if it's made out of wood, stone, and clay? Then that's not mentioned in the Torah, so that does not require. Same is true with plastic or any materials that are not related to the metal or the glass. Pottery, no, does not require. Okay? A mug, if it's earthenware, clay, and the like, does not require immersing in a mikveh. That's okay, as long as you don't make a blessing, you're fine. Yeah. Okay, now the second condition besides being of that material is that the keli is used directly in the preparation of food. Either to contain the food, as pots and pans have, they contain the food, or to eat from the food, like forks and spoons. That is an important condition. I mean, what about if you buy a crystal? Okay, and the crystal, you put apples and oranges inside. Do you have to immerse it? Not really. Not because it's crystal, but because it's not used directly in the preparation of food. Follow me? So this is an important criteria, because you have to determine every time you buy something, is this used directly or not directly? Because, for example, what about let's take as an example, not a teacup, but a peeler. A peeler is a good example. Does that require tevilah in the mikveh? It's metal. You're peeling the vegetable, but you don't really need to. You can eat the cucumber without it. But it's a form of a knife, right? So it requires, if it's metal, you should take it to the mikveh as well. Even though it's not necessarily directly connected to the cooking or to the eating process. Something that is used to grind the meat. The meat is not being cooked yet. It's still raw. In a sense, it would not require. So some things require, some things do not require, depending on what the material is, plus how it is used. So the typical vessels that require mikveh is the sakum, the silverware. It would require, sure. No, but you're eating with it. Okay? So if it's made out of metal or silver or whatever, and you eat from it, you eat with it or you eat from it like a pot and pan, you're putting it in your mouth, that would require mikveh. What? Food processor. You take the items that come in direct contact with the food, like the blades, if possible, and you take that to the mikveh, or you take the whole thing. But we run into a problem with electrical appliances. So I think I left that for a little bit later. Yeah, I'll talk about that soon. What is that? Right. So we'll talk about that soon. Anything which is not, it's only for preparing the food, it's only grinding the food, it's only mashing it. I mean, the food is raw yet. So in essence, it does not really require, because you're not cooking with it. You're not eating from it. It's just a way of preparing, mashing or grinding, not cooking. It would not require. Nevertheless, our custom is to take, once you go to the mikveh, you take just about everything that is made from those materials that require mikveh, and you immerse them all together. There are times, however, when something does not require beracha whatsoever, altogether, but it's customary to take it along with something that does require beracha. The example for that would be porcelain, expensive china, because china in reality does not require tevilah. It's not metal, it's not glass, but because it has a heavy glaze, a real expensive china, heavy glaze, that heavy glaze is like glass. And therefore, some say it requires tevilah without a beracha. So the best thing to do is, if you have an expensive china, not the cheap china, because the cheap china, the glazing is only a chemical. It's not the real glazing. So if you have an expensive set of china, you take it with your metal dishes that you're going to take to the mikveh anyway, and since you make a beracha on them, then that includes already everything else too.
The important is to take off the label.
I'm going to talk about that soon. That's under, let's see there. Yeah, I'll talk about that next. Yeah. Since you mentioned it. Yeah. What? Yeah.
Some kelim have to be taken apart to immerse it, and some you can immerse the whole thing at once. It's best, of course, to immerse the keli, if possible, all at once, not to do it in shifts. One side first, then the other side. So depending on the size of the keli, it may be a little bit difficult to do. So if it has parts to it, then you would remove the parts. You would disassemble it and take every part separately. In answer to your question, if it has a sticker, something that you would remove anyway, that you don't want there, then you need to remove it prior to immersing it in the mikveh. Alright, then we have kelim murkavim, which are various materials. We dropped off a little bit over there, but various materials means sometimes you may have a keli, a vessel, which the handle is wood, but the pot is metal, or the other way around. What do you do then? So if the main pot where the food is of a material that requires, then you immerse it in the mikveh, even though it has other parts that are not. If it's all wood, but it just has a little bit of metal on the sides, then it does not require mikveh. So it depends what the main part is, and especially if that main part is the one that's used with the food. It's not like the motor, which is at the bottom, has a metal box, but there's no food getting there. So it's important to note what the main part is. Kelim metzupim, I gave you the example of China, but you could also have a situation where you have a material which is exempt, but inside and outside it may be coated with metal or with silver. Then it would require tevilah as well. Some would say that, of course, the tevilah should be without a beracha. So this is one of the items that you could take with other kelim that require tevilah.
Let's say the pot has the coating of oil on rice. If we first wash off, we add the soap and water.
Give me a better example. What do you mean, oil?
Well, an iron pot.
Right.
People put them in the iron glass pot and have a coating thin film of oil.
That's true. There has been a concern in the past, and maybe even today, that certain stainless steel or aluminum pots and pans have a thin layer of oil that's put on them to make it shine, I believe. Right? And they were concerned that sometimes this oil comes from non-kosher sources. And some rabbinic authorities have, of course, instructed everybody to make hagalah, to immerse it in boiling hot water. To remove that thin layer of oil, or to burn it off. But some hold that because more than 24 hours has elapsed, it has become totally pagum, totally tasteless, right? And it's very, very thin anyway. It's completely burnt by the time it's processed. There's no real flavoring left. If that's what you're talking about? Yeah, so it has been an issue of concern. But that we'll talk about when we speak about hagalah. Now we're dealing with just the tevilah of kelim. Alright, aluminum, I think I mentioned that it does belong to the family of metals. So the custom is to immerse anything that's made out of aluminum just like anything else that is made out of metal. Well, okay. Teflon becomes an issue in hagalah. It does not become an issue in tevilah. Why? Because what is Teflon? Teflon in reality, yes, it's a plastic, but it has also metal. So some say that if the whole thing is coated with Teflon, or with some plastic inside and outside, then in reality it would not require tevilah. But I'm not so sure that everything is coated with Teflon. Right. So it's best to take it to the mikveh anyway. Yeah. It's a bigger problem when we speak about hagalah, how to deal with Teflon in hagalah. But in tevilat kelim, a lot of the things that you use directly with food, it's just best to take it to the tevilah. But if you were to take it by itself, it would not require beracha because of the coating, the inside coating. Yes. That's for later. I don't want to mix the two. This is tevilah of kelim. So for tevilah, we have similar halachot as a hagalah. In other words, insert similar materials, but one is the immersion, and one is to make it kasher if it became tareh. So they're quite different halachot as far as that is concerned. The other problem we have is with electrical appliances, which can become... Aluminum belongs to the family of metals. So anything which is made out of aluminum requires tevilah. The only question is, what about if it's an aluminum tray that you throw away? You know those, how do you call those? Disposable ones? Yeah. Do they require tevilah? Does it make a difference if you use it once? What about those that you end up using 3, 4, 5 times? They last for a while. So there are various opinions. We are not mahmir. The custom of most people is not to require tevilah for them, because they're made to be thrown out. Right. Yeah. Right. However, what about if you buy something that is in a container or a jar or a glass, that is, all it is a container. Okay, it's made to hold the food for you to buy and then to use, to pour it out. So after you've poured it out, you plan to use it. Does that require tevilah? Most authorities hold that it does not require tevilah. It does not require tevilah. If you plan to use it for a long time, you should take it to the tevilah. You should anyway. If you plan to use it for life, it's going to be something permanent. It's a nice jar or whatever. You plan to use it a lot, not just for the next couple of weeks, right? Temporarily. But otherwise, it doesn't really require tevilah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That does not require.
But if you're going to use it now after the 10 years, if you're going to trade that.
If it's something which is not only reusable, but it's also something which is made to last, not really something disposable, then you should take it to tevilah. But you should take it to the tevilah with other items that require a beracha. Otherwise, if you do take it to tevilah, don't make a beracha.
I think clearly using it to make the alcohol of the oven.
Right.
And then it's acceptable. But now, after you do, you want to save it, right? Use it to make another pot.
Right. Sure.
Okay. And it's the same item. And you're using it a second time.
Yeah, so what is the question?
It seems strange that now it was acceptable then, and now it's not acceptable until I take it to the next one.
No, it is acceptable, because even in the very beginning, even though it did not require a blessing, that it was only because it was not made for you to use as a vessel. It was made just to hold the food that you're purchasing, that you're eventually going to pour into something else. However, there's a question: if now you're going to use it for something else, so are you creating a new keli? Are you designated this as a new vessel for another purpose, or does it still have the same classification as the original vessel that you purchased? It was only made to hold food items. However, now you're deciding to use it. So you see that there are opinions, the various opinions as to what this is called. Well, all right. You don't expect that of non-Jewish manufacturers. Okay, what about if you buy something that you don't cook in, you don't eat in, but you store food in? It's made to hold food. It would also require tevilah. Not plastic. Any of the materials that I mentioned that requires, glass or metal. So some say therefore that salt shakers, for example, would require tevilah as well, because it's holding the food at all times, even though all it's doing is it is storing the food. You're not cooking or eating from it. That would also qualify for mikveh as well. Okay, electrical appliances in large vessels are very difficult. Sometimes to take to the mikveh. So what do? They tell me that with electrical appliances, there's no danger as long as you don't use it within 36 hours after you immersed it in the water. But it can become tricky. It can become difficult depending on what's involved. So some opinions hold that you can immerse it up until the electrical portion. Since that electrical outlet area is not used for food anyway, the water doesn't have to reach all the way there. So you can immerse only that portion that is outside of where the electric outlet is. If it's very, very difficult, there's another option that you can give it to a goy as a gift and borrow it from him. Then it's not yours anymore. That you do, by the way, when you have no choice. There's no mikveh in town, and you want to eat. You can't eat from a pot or a pan that was not immersed in a mikveh. If you know for sure that this was not put in a mikveh, you cannot eat from it. If food was already prepared in it, the food is kasher. It doesn't become tareh. But if you know for a fact, if you're invited over somebody's home, he invites you for dinner, and you suspect that he does not know about tevilah or he does not take his kelim, you cannot eat in his house in those kelim. If you feel that he knows about the halakha, but you're not sure if he took it or not, then it's okay. Obviously you should ask. That would be the best. But if you know for a fact that it was not taken to the mikveh, then you cannot eat from those kelim. They ask him to serve you on paper or plastic. Problem is, he's also cooking it. So it's always best to look into it. It's not a big effort to take the kelim to a mikveh, and it shouldn't be a problem. But some people are ignorant of this fact. That is why it's important to let them know. Alright, adot, restaurants. Let's say you're going out to eat somewhere and you don't know what this place does. Well, I have some news to tell you. Restaurants don't really have to put their kelim in a mikveh, according to some opinions. It's made for business. What they bought, all the vessels they bought, the kelim, is for business. Part of their business. Because it's part of their business, they're not using it for themselves. It doesn't really, according to some opinions, require mikveh. Therefore, it's okay. If the owner wants to, well, that's even better. But he doesn't really have to, according to some opinions. So that's not so much of an issue. Another big issue is Shabbat. On Shabbat, many authorities hold that you cannot take a keli to a mikveh because it's a form of tikkun, you're fixing it. Some Sephardic opinions hold that it's okay. It's not a real tikkun, it's not a real problem. But the custom is not to do tevilat kelim on Shabbat. That is what we follow. So therefore, it's always based to make sure that if you're buying something new and you're going to use it on Shabbat, to take it to the mikveh before Shabbat. Not to rely on that opinion, which holds that it will be okay. Unless you had no choice. Sephardim follow the opinion that it will be permissible if you had no other way, no other choice. Take the keli in on Shabbat. Of course, in a place where there's an eruv, and put it in the mikveh. But Ashkenazim follow the stricter opinion that it's not permissible. So what do you do then? You give it to a goy, and then you borrow it from him. Yeah. No, that's not a problem. Just on Shabbat. In Yom Tov maybe. Okay? So that giving it to a goy, believe it or not, is an option in some situations. It's his, I'm giving you a gift. And you have to, of course, be sincere about it. Right? And then you borrow it from him, so it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to him. And he, of course, lets you borrow it indefinitely maybe, but that's up to him. What? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, there are other options if you're interested. If you have a big pot, it's very difficult to take to the mikveh. There's no mikveh. You can make a hole in it. A hole. Yeah. And then have a professional Jew fix it. So since it's being fixed right now by a Jew, and I said professional because he better know what he's doing, then it becomes okay. What? In a pot, obviously, it's a problem. It would have to be.
You have to hold it at the top.
Yeah. 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 Anyway, that. Yeah. Do what? Very, very large kelim that are always sitting in the ground and are not basically movable, they don't require tefillah. If that's what you're talking about.
No,
Percolators. Yeah, you should. Sure.
You must put in it.
Yeah, sure.
But the electricity is breaking.
Right. So it depends on the circumstances. If you can cover it up or put that portion which is not close to the electricity into the water, there are various ways to avoid that problem. Yeah. Right. That's the second option. Well, it's the best thing because it does require. It's used for water. It's used for food. So basically, just to review what we just covered: silverware, grill, right? Trays in the oven, right? The racks, or even the tavniyot that you use for baking. All those items that are made from these materials, the metal and the glass, that have direct contact with food, either used to make the food or to eat from, or in preparation for the food in some way. If it directly affects the food, requires tevilah with a beracha. The what? Plate, sure, if it's from glass or from metal. If it's not glass or metal, it does not require tevilah. It's a good idea if it's very fine, expensive china. than to take it with other items that require beracha. But if you take, if you have, for example, what's that, the material that you buy, the cheap plates? No. Not ceramic. No, that, it looks, it looks like, right, that's the one. No? They sell it everywhere. Everybody uses it today. You know, the one that doesn't break, like you said. It's supposed to not break, but it has broken by me too. Made, but it's not that. No. Yeah. No, in English, I forget what it's called. It's very common. Can't remember right now. I'll remember soon in a moment. No, plates that are made from this material. Anyway, it would not require beracha. I can't think of it right now. Unless it's either metal or zechut or glass. No, that's not enough. The only time you don't need the tevilah is if it's mamash not sitting directly on it. If it's only as a base, if the kli is a base, is a form of base. But in the betocho, mamash, even though you just put a piece of paper, aluminum foil, it would not be sufficient. If it covers the whole surface area, then maybe it would be a good temporary solution, because you're not putting it directly on it. But what's the problem? I mean, למה צריך לעשות את זה?
לפעמים קורה שזה לא לוקחים את זה או משהו, אז היה בבית או משהו, או מישהו אחר שעוקב, אתה לא בטוח שהוא לקח את תפילה ונשים לפה את זה. They use the voice as a not sure they'll take תפילה.
כן, זה יותר טוב מבלי זה כמובן. But that's not a solution, it's not a permanent solution. Yeah. Right.
And I take a sheet of aluminum foil and I put it on top of my broiler so I can throw light bulbs to get up my broiler.
Okay, right.
And I carry little hose in it so the fluid from the meat is drained with the blood, whatever it is, make it live
right
now. Now, is that aluminum foil okay?
For what?
Because I'm using a sheet of aluminum foil and I'm cooking on it, I'm broiling on it.
Okay, so what are you saying? Therefore?
It does. Does that have to be immersed? Why does that have to be?
No, you need to. No, you still need to immerse.
That raw aluminum foil?
Not aluminum foil. The vessel. Right. Everything. When you buy a new oven, and you have racks inside, you have anything where the food is going to be directly on. But for example, I'll give you an example. Here's an example of that you don't need, even though it's metal and even though it's used for food. But because it's not directly affecting the food. The burners. What happens with burners? What's on the burner? The pot itself. So the pot you're taking to the mikveh, not the burner. So the food is not sitting directly on the burner. But, now listen to this example. What about a microwave? Where you have the glass plate. That's different. Why? Because on that glass platter or plate, you sometimes put food directly. On the glass, sure. I put food and you put food directly. On a paper towel or something, right? Yeah. Why not? What's wrong with it? If it's something that it's not liquid, it's not soup, you can put a burrito, right? Or bread, right? So you're putting it directly on top of the glass platter. That glass platter that rotates goes to the mikveh. It's glass. Many times we don't think of that because we don't use it that way. We put something on top of the glass, not the food directly. So anything in the oven or anything elsewhere where the food does not come in direct contact with, then you would not need. But just to put a small piece of paper, that does not exclude it. It would have to be the example that I gave. The burner, or for example, the what do you call those, in the oven that holds the cakes, not the shelves, the racks, right? Most people don't put food directly on the rack, but in the broiler area they may, right? The broiler tray or whatever. They put the steaks or the fish, whatever you're boiling. So that would require taking it to the mikveh, because the food is directly on it.
So if I'm going to warm up,
Because all this is metal, right? Go ahead.
if I go over to a microwave and I want to warm up a sandwich,
Right.
make sure I cover it out. When they do the office where other people warm stuff up, as long as mine is...
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that at the end.
I'm okay.
I'm going to get to that at the end. How to use a non-kosher oven or microwave. That we'll talk about next with Agalat Kelim.
So microwave is one that not be ready to close to something to say.
Then the platter would not require. Okay. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. But anything that was not taken to the tevilah that requires tevilah, you are not allowed to even use it temporarily. So if you know that you're never going to be using it for putting food directly on it, then it does not require tevilah. But if you may use it, then you take it right away to the tevilah.
But you may use it, but you're not using it that day. You want something else, but not in that way. You want to put it in the face.
Then that would be okay. Yeah. And what are you going to do with the tevilah? The tavnit requires tevilah. Why? Why does the tavnit require tevilah? Because it's used to put food directly. So when you buy a tavnit, you need to take it to the tevilah. Even if right now you can say, I'm going to cover it up. Right?
So is that a question of covering it up?
Chat pami lo tzarich, no.
Is it a problem covering it up because the food is steaming up and they can come back with the cover?
No, we're talking about tevilah right now. Right? Let's not mix the two. So therefore, if you buy something like a tavnit, a tray of sorts that has food put directly on it, even though you're not putting food directly on it right now, it's something that requires tevilah. You shouldn't use it really. You shouldn't really use it until you take it to the tevilah. Now, but if it's something that is dual purpose, you can put food directly on it, like the platter in the microwave. Or a lot of times people just put a cup or a plate inside. Then you can use it temporarily, I guess, for those things, because you're not using it to put food directly on it. But as soon as you can, you should take it if you intend to use it also to put food directly on it.
You go to the mikveh and you put all the pots in, and you go home and wash the food.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah, no problem. Okay, now what do? You want to take a lot of silverware, expensive silverware, to the mikveh, and you're afraid that it's going to fall into the mikveh. Okay, there are little perforated bags or baskets, salim kaile or sakiyot, that you can put them in, and because it's perforated, the water will reach all the sides, and it's perfectly fine. If you tie it with a string, let's say you're in a river, you don't want it to swim away, right? So you can tie it with the string, but just make sure, whether you're holding it with your hand or whether you tie it with the string, that the knot is not too tight, or your hand is not holding too tight, because the water has to reach all over the keli, all over the vessel. Al tevilat keli or al tevilat kelim, depending on how many you're making. Yeah? No. Racks and refrigerators, it's just, you put, yeah. It's not really necessary for the eating, right? It's just a shelf to put stuff on top of it, that does not require tevilah. Yeah. כן. לא, זה הכל, אפשר את כולם ביחד בתוך, לכן אמרתי, אם משתמשים בסל, לא צריך, אבל. No. If you have many kelim at once, it's not a good idea to put them all in the basket, because the water may not get all over the place. But if you have a lot of mazlikot, a lot of forks or spoons or nice silverware, the water goes all over. You put them in a sal, in a basket, or in a nylon bag that is perforated. That's what everybody uses. And you put it all in there, all at the same time. Bevat achat.
You have to make sure that it doesn't touch the bottom of the basket, the perforated basket.
What doesn't touch?
The fork. Let's say you have 5 forks.
Right.
You can dump it in the water.
Right.
The bottom of the fork is touching, even if there's water in it.
No, but we're talking about a perforated basket that has holes all over it. It's just not big enough for the fork to fall out. Right? So the water will go all over. Even that little portion, yeah.
There's so much water. Yeah.
You don't have to do it.
Sure you do. Sure, you eat or you drink. Right? If it's glass or metal, you have to do it. Okay, the second portion is the agala of kelim. So you bought your new vessels, you've immersed them in the mikveh, but from time to time it can happen in any kosher kitchen that the vessel itself becomes not kosher. For example, you use it for milk, and for some reason somebody by mistake used it for meatballs, right? And now it became taref. Or let's say you buy something from a goy for whatever reason, you want to make it kasher. So we need to know the dinim or the halachot of hagalat kelim. How to make something kasher if it was taref, whether it was an isur, like nevelot trefot, or whether it was basar and halab, or for Pesach. You want to be able to use something for Pesach. In all of these situations, if one wants to be able to use it, he would need to make something called hagala or libun, depending on what's involved. So I put on top of here hagala libun, that is what we call kashering, or making something kosher again. There is a rule of kevolo kach polto, which means that according to the Din Torah, the method of absorption is also the method of extraction, which means the way a vessel absorbs the flavor in its walls, in the same way it is able to expel it. So if in the keli something was absorbed which is not kosher, like meat and milk together, or something which is asur, you can expel it. You need to expel it. You need to extract it out of the walls. How do you accomplish it? In the same method that it was absorbed. If it's absorbed with heat, with water, boiling water, then you need boiling water. If it's absorbed with heat without liquids, like in an oven, then it would require something called libun. So this is something very important, because either we do it for Pesach, or we may have to do it because something went wrong in the kitchen. So this is the rule that we need to remember. Now, let me just give you an example. A cup of coffee, how does it absorb? Of course with hot water, but that hot water is a kli sheni usually. Kli sheni meaning that the temperature in it is not as hot as in a pot of boiling water on top of the fire. So in reality, if something happened to that cup, that metal cup, you would be able to use the same amount of heat as originally it absorbed, because of this rule of kevolo kach polto. But let me just remind you at the very start, the custom today is that even though there is something called kevolo kach polto, everything that requires hagala, we just put into the real hagala. Real hagala meaning on a pot of boiling hot water sitting on a fire. So today, if you want to do hagala, this is what you need to do, is you need to set up a big pot on top of a flame that is boiling, that you can see the bubbles coming out. And into that, you would immerse a vessel that requires hagala after you have waited at least 1 day. And after you've cleansed it thoroughly. So it's thoroughly clean, you've waited 1 day, and you immerse it in a pot of boiling hot water. That's called hagala. Let's say you can't wait a day, you could also use soap. That's why I put here soap in parentheses. What does the soap do to the water? It makes the water pagum. Anything in the water, any flavor that may be there of the isur would also become pagum. Yeah. Well, so anyways, that is the essence of hagala. In order to make something kasher, something that has become taref, depending on what the materials are, which I'm going to get to that next, this is the method of doing it, of accomplishing that. If it was used with liquid, you need liquid, hot boiling liquid, to expel the flavor, and you would need to have a pot sitting on top of the fire so you could have it bubbling. What do? You put it in, and after a couple seconds you take it out. You don't leave it there too long. All you need to do is put it in for a couple seconds and then remove it out. That's fine. The custom, we'll leave that towards the end. The custom is that after you put it into hot boiling water, you rinse it out in cold water, just to remove anything that may be left over on top that was expelled from the pot. So this is done whether it's for Pesach or all year round. If something happens in the kitchen that you want to make kosher that requires hagala. So what requires hagala? Only something that came in contact with liquid. There was water involved and it was hot. If it was not hot, if it's just a plain cup, you never use it for hot liquids, then in reality, technically, all you will need to do is just rinse it out.
because of the rule I said before, depending on the method and how it's used. But sometimes we use certain things for both, hot and cold. You don't know. I'll give you an example of something which is always cold. Your goblet for Kiddush on Shabbat, the kos. Does anybody ever drink hot tea? Ashkenazim are machmir for Pesach to put everything in hot boiling water, even the goblets. Everything goes through Hagalah. For Pesach we're machmir. But in reality, that would be something that does not require, because most of its use at least is cold. Just rinse it out. Milk and meat fell inside, and what could happen? It was not absorbed, it's cold. Rinse it out. That's the method. But if you use it with hot water, then you would need hot boiling water, bubbling. What if it's a big pot? Where are you going to find a bigger pot to put this pot in? So what do? One way of doing it is by putting this pot on top of the fire and throwing in a hot brick or a hot piece of metal inside as it's boiling. And that will cause the water to spill over the sides. Yeah. And what that accomplishes, it strengthens the heat even more, and it also allows for the water to escape over the rims, over the edges, because everything has to become kasher. So the original keli, that is how, by the way, that is the Haggalah you have to do to the keli where you're putting things into. If that keli itself is not kosher, right? You don't want to put meat and milk either together, or pots and pans of the different types. So you would make that keli kosher first, and you would on the outside you could also pour hot boiling water on the outside. Besides whatever poured out, you can also pour the irui, pour hot boiling water, and that would make it the outside clean as well. Now, yeah. Yeah, but we don't use steam for Haggalah. You're right. Some talk about it. Some things mention this. Right, but we don't use it. We use real boiling water. Now, what about if you have a pot the whole year, you've used it to make lasagna, and now you want to start using the pot to make something with meat? Could you make Haggalah and just change over? Ashkenazim don't do it. And most people don't do it, actually. You don't just change, because you may forget, right? So you don't just change every day. You decide, well, today I want to use it for this, so I'm going to make it Haggalah. Then use it for this. Tomorrow I'll use it for something else. No, we don't do that. Unless it's for Pesach. For Pesach, Pesach happens once a year. You want to use it for Pesach too. Today things are so cheap, we just buy separate set of dishes and pots and pans for Pesach. But if you wanted to use it for Pesach, you can make Haggalah and then change the type that it's used, because you're doing it for Pesach. But ordinarily throughout the year, even though Sephardim hold that you can do it, Ashkenazim are machmir, and it's best not to do it, not to change it. But if you wanted to, if you needed to, if you had a real reason for it, an important reason, you would be able to change it. All you need to do is to make the correct type of Haggalah. If there's water involved, it's the method that I explained before, using a hot boiling pot sitting on top of the flame, and inserting the whatever you're making Haggalah into it. Yes? Well, it depends. We talked about that in the past. Basar v'chalav. It all depends if the meat was hot, if the milk was hot, or if there were two or cold. If you're just dealing with cold milk, cold meat, you just wash out the meat. Okay? Anytime you have mixtures, you have to consult with the rabbi, because it could be complicated. What happens to the pot? What happens to the food? Okay, so we spoke a little bit about Haggalah. What's important to remember that all of this is only true and can only be done with metal. Haggalah is intended for metal, but it can also be used for plastics, for rubber vessels, stone, stone, wood. The Haggalah would help it too. Haggalah will not help with cheres, with clay. If you have a clear cheres, if you have something from pottery that's made from clay, and it becomes taref, you might as well throw it in the garbage. You cannot make it kasher. Okay? Therefore, china is a big problem. You cannot just buy china from a goy that he ate his nevelot and trefot in it, because you cannot make it kasher if it had isur inside. But what happens if somebody sold you his most expensive china that is 100% kasher, But he used it for meat, and you want to use it for dairy. And but you can't make it kasher. In that case, because there was no real isur involved, it was meat. Meat by itself is not an isur. It's just when it combines with milk. If 12 months elapsed from the last time he used it for meat, you can make hagala 3 times for it. 3 times, and then it's okay. If it's a very expensive china and you have no choice, only in that situation, it's a very expensive china, you want to use it, right? 12 months passed, and only in this situation where it was not asur, it did not have any isur, nevelot and trefot, it was used for kosher meat, but you want to use it for milk, or the other way around. 12 months elapsed, you can make hagala 3 times. Glass is a big area of contention between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. For Sephardim, glass is a very simple matter. Glass? Glass is so smooth, it doesn't absorb anything, according to some opinions. You can rinse it, wash it, and use it for anything you want. Ashkenazim said, no way. Glass is, they say, can be very possibly similar to heres. It may be a big problem. We don't know for sure. And therefore, glass, you cannot make kasher. They don't make it kasher. So therefore, if you use it for meat, use it for meat, use it for milk. You don't mix the two. And for Pesach, they don't make glass kasher for Pesach. Right? If it's cold, it's no problem. The problem is when it's hot. For Ashkenazim, it becomes a problem. There are situations, however, where you can, if it was used with cold liquid, there are ways that even for Ashkenazim it could be permissible if you soak it 3 days in water, and every single day you change the water. That also has the power, according to some opinions, to extract anything even from glass. But otherwise, that is one major difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim glass. For Sephardim, it's simple. You can just rinse it no matter how you used it. You should still not use it for both, meat and dairy. You shouldn't get used to using the same thing for both. You should have separate dishes for everything. But in case you did, it's not a problem, you just rinse it out. Another material that is a problematic material is Teflon. Because Teflon, we're dealing with an issue which there's 2 issues here. The issue of no liquids involved. What's the whole idea of Teflon? You don't need liquids, right? It doesn't burn. That is one issue. Issue number 2 is the material that Teflon is made out of. Until now we spoke about liquids. Anytime there's no liquids involved, like in a frying pan, unless there's oil, if there was no oil, then hagala would not be sufficient. It would require libun. Libun means putting it through a torch, fire. A frying pan, which if you use oil all the time, then there's a little bit of oil, then it's okay. You can do hagala to the frying pan too. But technically, if you were to use the frying pan, or something like Teflon, which does not require oil, and it's completely dry, then hagala would not be sufficient. It would require libun. But guess what? Libun is no good either, because it will burn the Teflon. It will destroy it, so it's no good. So you can't do it. So if something became asur in this Teflon pot or pan, you might as well throw it out. You can't make it. You're not going to be able to make it kasher. But if it was used for meat perhaps, and somehow something happened, it was used for dairy, not in the same day of course, after several days, you could make, some opinions hold you still could make hagala to it, to the Teflon pot. But Teflon can become a problem. So I'm just letting you know that it's not as simple as with the others, with the metal or glass. No, what they would do over there is put in another layer, a layer of metal. Yeah, that's similar to it. Yeah, that is a way of making kosher. Yeah, because you're redoing it. It's like you're recreating it. It's like if you were to take a clay, you could take the clay cheres. If you were to or the ceramic or the china and put it in its original oven of 900 degrees, where it's like reforming and recreating itself, it would be mutar. The problem is that a lot of materials at that high temperature would shatter. But if it were possible and you could put it into that temperature, then you are redoing it completely, reforming it, then it would be permissible. Right. If you're using oil, then it's no problem. Okay, the last item is the tanur. Tanur, or anything that is fire, there's no water, there's no liquids involved. requires flame, requires torching. If you have a self-cleaning oven, it would be, of course, the easiest way around this problem by just turning it on to the self-cleaning cycle, right, for 3 hours. If you don't have a self-cleaning oven for Pesach, you can use the highest temperature on the oven for about an hour and a half or two at the highest temperature. After you have cleansed it very, very well with those very powerful chemicals, easy off or easy on? Yeah, and you've waited at least 24 hours. So many of the halachot of cleaning an oven for Pesach would apply a whole year round too, if you were in a hotel somewhere. It's best, of course, not to mess around with ovens that are not self-cleaning. If there was nevilot and trafot, if you're moving in